I'm recovering some back issues. Okay, John, why don't you give us a countdown?
In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Eskin. On behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, it's my privilege to welcome you to our 77th webinar, Nonprofit Empowerment Series. I'm going to give our subject matter expert a fuller introduction. First, let me say, Sally, every time you're with us is a charm, but Sally Bryant is CEO and president of Bryant Group. And this is the first time I think you've ever been home in Dallas to do this. Sally, how's the Bryant family doing?
We're doing fantastic. Thank you. Great to be here today.
And I got a fuller introduction. I'd also like to take a second to talk about, we're very excited about the webinars we have lined up through September. And my colleague, Jeff Jowdy, who's president of Lighthouse Council outside of Nashville, right, Jeff? He is going to lead the program next week. It's going to be on high performing development officers. I'll give you a whole minute or maybe 90 seconds to talk about that subject.
Well, thanks, Jim. The first thing I'd say is hire Sally's firm to retain Sally's firm to hire and retain them to coach. But we're looking forward to a great conversation on high performing fundraising professionals, and some of the topics will be: our fundraisers born or made? Do fundraisers make good CEOs? What can we do about this plague of high turnover? And we're going to talk a bit about asking for gifts, and even get into the volunteer sphere, and how can fearless business leaders falter in asking for a gift and even falter in serving on board. So looking forward to a great conversation.
Well, Jeff, we look forward to that too. You got 2 weeks to get ready. 4 weeks to get ready is my very good friend from Boca Raton, Florida, Margie Hellshine, who founded a wonderful organization called America Connected. Can you take a moment to tell us about the mission of America Connected?
Hi, America Connected is about cultural diplomacy, bringing people and nations of the world closer together. There has never been a more pressing time and neediness of this ever before. We're trying to work together with people so that we can help solve a lot of the problems in the world with, the economic growth problem, and with all the changes going on in the world. We hope to be a positive force and bringing people together.
Thank you. We look forward to your webinar. I want to take a second. We're very proud of our monthly newsletter called Stratagems, and it played a direct role in Sally being here. I interviewed probably with other 500,000 people with her husband at the DW airport. I didn't get the job, but I met him. I put him on my newsletter list, and I think somehow he forwarded it to Sally, and we've become colleagues since then. So if you don't get our newsletter, you're going to be sent a copy of this recording, and you just click there. You can add yourself to the distribution list. I also was proud to write my first book, 10 Simple Fundraising Lessons, and I'm working on number 2. I hope to have it out by September. It's going to be on scoring your first and next $1 million gifts. And I told Sally that I'm a slideaholic. I'm jumping through here. At this point, by the way, I'd like to introduce my producer, John Largent. John, can you tell how people can either through the chat space type in their questions, or better yet, we'd like to have them come on camera and see and hear them in person?
Thank you, Jim. You just told them, so that saved me some work. But yes, if you have any questions for Sally, Jim, or any topics that happen today, go into the chat room, type it. There'll be time toward the end where I can speak to Jim and read the question out. But we would really like it if you would just unmute yourself, take your cell phone camera, and ask the question yourself. I think that makes a more engaging webinar.
And by the way, this is one of the few times we're going to insist that you keep to the chat space. Would you just take a moment and type in your name the name of your nonprofit, and your city. I know we have, I think something like 12 states represented today. And let's give you a second. John, I guess you can't tell the location. Can you share a couple of the nonprofits, or what are you seeing on in the chat space? John, what are you seeing in the chat space?
Yeah, I've got Margie, America Connected in Boca Raton. I've got John in Los Angeles with the
Oh.
group.
What organization, John? We love, we like to have, was it Angels with us? John, can you come on camera for a second?
Yes, give me one moment.
While he's getting on, I'll mention a few more. Kathy is in Santa Fe with
Yes,
CareNet
okay,
Pregnancy
let's
Center.
see, Kathy, thank you for joining us. You know,
Kathy
she's been a regular.
Campion with Assistance League of San Antonio. Don Gleason from Military Transition Roundtable. Wendy Wright.
I think Wendy Wright is, I believe she's with Sally, if I remember right. And by the way, is our California friend, can we put him on the screen?
Hey, John.
Hello.
Hi, could you tell us your name and what nonprofit you're with and what part of LA?
Certainly. So I am in Los Angeles in the San Pedro area, and I'm not with a nonprofit. I have the pleasure of working with Sally at Bryant Group.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. And I'll tell you what, this is one more, and let's stick with you. Do we have any suggestions for a future webinar topic? Type it in. Don Gleason, why don't you come on camera for a second, because you've been a regular member of our learning community. Don, he runs something called a wonderful nonprofit called the Military Transition Roundtable. Don, can you come on camera?
I should be here.
Don, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Any suggestions for a topic for a future webinar?
Oh boy. I think that the hardest thing is I hate to say it, but it's it's getting the guts to make the ask, right?
Uh-huh.
And we've
Okay.
talked it a couple times, but
Yeah, overcoming fundraising fear. And by the way, that's pretty.
fear of
And I
rejection.
think also closing the deal. And let me introduce now my friend from the Metroplex. Are you closer to Dallas or Fort Worth, Sally?
Almost exactly in between, but on the Dallas side of the airport.
Okay. And she is president and CEO of the Bryant Group. She gave me a positioning statement, so let's see if I have it right. Bryant Group, no V in front of it, just Bryant Group, all uppercase, is an executive search and leadership consulting firm specializing in recruiting, developing, and coaching great leaders for higher education, healthcare, and other nonprofit sectors. The Bryant Group has worked literally with hundreds of the most prestigious healthcare systems, private and public university, and other nonprofits in both the US and Canada. And I think you're getting to your 35th anniversary. Is that right, Sally?
Yes, coming
The
up.
thing that impresses me, I'm gonna let you brag. I find this incredible. You know, the biggest challenge we face is keeping our fundraisers on staff. There's a price to be paid when we lose them. And it reminds me of Tom Cruise's film, the movie, The Firm, where nobody could leave the company. But could you share the retention comparisons of your firm with the general industry?
Thank you, Jim. Yes, so Bryant Group's average tenure of a placement is about 5.5 years. As compared to, it is difficult to find all of these statistics, but the statistics for major gift officers is about 18 to 24 months for the average major gift officer to stay at an organization. At our C-suite and leadership levels, our people stay an average of 8 years. And
Thank you.
with the client that
Okay.
we place them with, yeah.
Sally, here I promise to you, no easy questions, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
And first of all, you know, I'm kind of reminded about the Great Gatsby. because we started with the great right sizing and then we went to the great resignation. And now we're in the great recruitment retention phase. Sally, can you take a moment and talk about what these great words mean and opportunities for both employers and employees?
Absolutely. And I'm going to apologize right up front. We have a major thunderstorm going on outside, so loud that car alarms were going off a minute ago. So that's why I was muting out. So hopefully that will not continue to happen. Jim, as you know, I have believed in the beginning that this is the great opportunity. And of course, out of the great right sizing, resignation, recruitment, and retention, we are in the great recruitment and retention phase, which of course we as a recruiting firm love. But I have continued to believe from the beginning that it's an opportunity. So for employees, it's an opportunity because number one, all the vacancies that were made during the pandemic are now being rehired as people start to understand fundraising as a very important source of income, including the fact, as you and I were talking, that 2020 was the biggest fundraising, the biggest philanthropy year ever in the United States. So those positions are being rehired. There are positions being created like crazy as people go into new campaigns or campaigns that were paused now on full speed ahead. And the third thing is all of this is creating an upward pressure on salaries. So those are all good news for employees. So what's the good news for nonprofits? For nonprofits, the good news, the great opportunity is to be able to diversify your team, number one. Bring in people from other professions. Bring in people who may be racially different, geographically different, different in experience. We believe in a rich tapestry being the most robust and best team. So I'm going to say one is diversify. Two is strategically restructure. This is your opportunity to say, do I have my structure the way that it needs to be? And number three is to promote from within. Mm-hmm. This pandemic showed leadership out of places that we may have never expected we had leaders. So think about that and tap those people to move up.
Very good. Hey, more than ever, we've heard this thing about working from home, remote work, hybrid work. Comment for a moment. What do you think are both the capabilities and the limitations of remote workplace?
Remote workplace does definitely have capabilities and limitations. So in the most general sense, not focusing just on actual frontline fundraisers, but in the most general sense, I'm going to say the number one capability is you literally, if you've created the right environment in your home, you can literally get more done because you do not have your commute. You're not walking across campus or between buildings to go to a meeting or driving downtown. So if you're truly working most of your time from home, you can focus and get more done. Again, assuming you've created the environment and you have that ability to do so at home. The limitation, and Margie's going to love this one, because the limitation is exactly the opposite side of the coin. You can do Zooms back to back, which is not healthy. You've lost your boundary creating commute that creates your boundary from home to work. You've lost that ability to go out in the sunshine and walk across campus to your next meeting, or go again, get in your car and drive downtown or whatever it is to get out and about and move. It's one of the things we've been talking about. If you're not a healthy person, you don't have healthy employees, it will affect your results, both in terms of mental health, emotional health, and actual bottom line results.
Sally, you heard you talk about this before. You have seen virtual and traditional in-person hiring processes and interviews produce different results. Is that right?
Absolutely. We have experienced all kinds of recruiting. So before the pandemic, we did a lot of our work in person. We usually took at least 3 trips per search, 2 times to the client site and at least once to other places to meet candidates. And then during the pandemic, we've done searches either hybrid, some by video interviewing and some in person. We've also done full on virtual hiring, and recruiting. So the different results, this is amazing and something I don't think a lot of people thought about in the beginning. So I'll tell a story in just a minute, but if you think about when you interview somebody by video, can you tell if they're looking you in the eye? Can you tell if they are including everybody on camera? Are they looking at everybody? What's their body language with a group? No matter how many people are on a video interview, it's actually more like a one-on-one. So you've lost the ability to understand how someone truly interacts with a group of people. So what we saw, and the most stark example, was at the beginning of the pandemic, we were ready to bring a group of semifinalists to a hospital for a vice president position. The pandemic shut down the travel. The state where we were going was literally closed. You couldn't travel in or out. And I said to the CEO, we don't want to lose the enthusiasm of these candidates. Would you be willing to just do an interview by Zoom? And then as soon as travel opens up, we'll get them back. We'll get them actually on site. And he said, yes, I'm willing to do that, but I'm not willing to make any decisions based on my Zoom interview. I said, fantastic. I fully support that. So we had 4 semifinalists, and I think Jim knows the story. He did, after the interviews, rank them when he and I were talking. He said, this is my number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. 6 weeks later, we got them to his site, to his hospital, actually the very day that the state opened up. And we did the interviews in person. I was sitting right there, and his number 1 person just couldn't relate to a group of people, probably especially a group of people with masks, in her defense, because that was new. And his number 1 person by video became his number 4. And in fact, someone that he would not consider for the job. It's that different.
I find that fascinating. And also in the fundraising area, we are asking both in person and virtual, and we need the people we hire to have both skills. Let's talk a little about the Great Resignation. What are your suggestions besides the obvious one, more money? But what are ways nonprofits can keep high-performing staff?
Ways that nonprofits can keep high-performing staff is probably the very same way that a corporation or any kind of group or organization can keep high-performing staff. To me, the number 1 way is to focus on organizational, cultural health. And what do I mean by that? I mean functional relationships, authentic leadership, absolute vulnerability-based trust. Those are the things that create health and wellness in your group. And those are the things that I think keep people there. Even, of course, everybody needs enough money to live, and money is nice. But as Jim said, after money, those are the things that we believe are really important and that we focus on in our leadership consulting.
Hey, Sally, let's flip the coin. What if you're an individual employee? What might be the opportunities for moving up, either in your own organization or going elsewhere?
First, to me, what is most important is to understand what you are passionate about, and to know, because you can move up where you are, maybe, or you can look for a new job. But if you are not following your passion, you are never going to be happy. And life is too short to work just for a paycheck. So do realize this is an opportunity to maybe take the next step in your career, but to first understand, what am I passionate about? And if I'm already at a place that I want to be at, can I move up here? Can I take on additional responsibility? Can I go to my supervisor and understand what might be that next step here to be able to support the organization that I'm with? I also want to say, Jim, yes, there is a tremendous upward pressure on salaries in the fundraising profession, especially. But I do want to caution people. It's a good time to possibly get a raise if the resources are there. But if you are looking for a job, if you are interviewing for a job, there are still constraints that the organization has on what they can offer you, no matter how much they want you. We have seen a candidate torpedo their candidacy by asking for $30,000 above the top of the range. The interview actually was canceled. She hadn't even had her on-campus interview, and the interview was canceled because that's just not realistic when you think about internal equity and budgets. So you do need to be realistic even in this time of opportunity.
Okay, no easy questions. You know, someone said human beings are not logical all the time. And I got to tell you, whether it's in person or virtually, not everyone's going to get along in the nonprofit sector, the corporate sector. And my question, what do we learn? We probably knew something about settling arguments, you know, in person. What have we learned about virtually helping employees act as a team?
I think the way that people interact in both virtual and real life, IRL, is similar in the way that you want to work. So let me explain what I mean. When you are virtual, it's almost like you have to pay more attention to the relationship. So in a way, that's been a good thing. We've had many clients come to us and say, I want my team to understand each other better so that we can work better together. I think we were almost relying on that fact of, hey, we can hang out at the coffee pot and have a chat, whereas now we can't do that. So people are realizing that they need to intentionally focus on what I was talking about earlier, that organizational cultural health, which starts with understanding your colleagues, number one, understanding what their personalities are like, understanding that trust is the basis of every healthy organization. And you can trust each other best when you understand where they're coming from. You talked to John Tulin at the beginning of this talk, and he's probably wondering now why he joined, because he knows I'm going to tell a story about him really quickly. We do a lot of DISC training, and John and I are completely opposite on the DISC scale, but we've worked together for years, and we work very well together, mostly because we understand that the other person needs something different than we do, right? So I can have a conversation, boom, off the cuff. John likes to be prepared, which is why you should actually have him be your next speaker. He's amazing speaker. He's always prepared. So different personalities can work well together, but it's that understanding each other.
Sally, I grew up in Boston longer ago than I want to admit, but I remember drinking Moxie, and to be kind, it was acquired taste. And it was even marketed as distinctly different. I love your website, and I read about leading with Moxie. What does that mean, leading with Moxie?
Well, Jim, first I have to show you that everybody in Bryant Group has a can of your favorite in their office.
Hi, pardon me, how would you describe the taste?
I actually had never tasted it until our last retreat, and we decided it's a mix between root beer and Dr. Pepper. That's how I would describe it. I think it is an acquired taste. So Moxie is one of our 6 core values at Bryant Group. Core values are very important to any organization. Number one, so you know if you're on the right team. Moxie is probably the only one of our 6 core values that if you ask anyone who had read our website, that's the one that everyone remembers because it's different. We believe that being creative and courageous and taking risks have everything to do with great leadership and with teams working together well and to being able to solve a problem. I also believe many of you have seen the graphic where your comfort zone is here in this circle and growth happens outside of the circle. Well, to me, this is your comfort zone and this is your Moxie zone. outside of the comfort zone. That's where you grow.
I got to tell you, my grandmother taught me anything that tasted that bad had to be good for you. So that was another marketing plus for Moxie. I'd like to turn now to our learning community audience. We have board chairs like Dawn Gleason. We have founders like Margie Helpshine. And we have, I think it was Kathy from Santa Fe. Are you there? Kathy, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Kathy, would you share, we're asking people, it's about halfway through the year, what are you emphasizing in your fundraising? Is it grant writing? Is it events? Is it virtual events? Is it one-on-one solicitations? What are you all been emphasizing in your fundraising?
Right. In our fundraising, we are emphasizing the world is slightly changing now. For us, we are a pregnancy resource center, and there's a lot going down in the pro-life, pro-abortion world that is affecting us pretty heavily, that we didn't anticipate when we wrote our 2022 budget at the end of 2021. So we are really needing to step up our fundraising, and we are continuing with the same fundraisers that we've always had. We're looking for new fundraisers, and we've also pulled the executive director, who is sort of the face of CareNet of Santa Fe, and have her working on fundraising right now. She knows everybody in Santa Fe. She's a native Santa Fean, and we have her meeting with donors for lunch. We're looking at doing a VIP dinner, which we have not done before. So we're looking for new ways, yeah, and we need them.
I have like a million questions ready for Sally, but before we go there, is there anyone else in the learning community want to give an update? You don't have to talk about your results, just talk about your activities. What type of fundraising buttons are you pushing? Is there someone, I could pick on Dawn Gleason, but I'd like to hear from someone else. Somebody else, maybe anybody from the East Coast besides Margie? Anybody else like to come on camera?
I am going to jump on. This is Don.
Don, jump on. What's the military transition? What type of activities are you embracing to raise funds?
Yeah, the piece we really focused in on last month with Mental Health Awareness Month and suicide. You know, the number one ideation for military is during transition for suicide. Number one ideation for suicide, and they're twice as likely as their civilian peers to be consider suicide, and we're still losing 22 a day. That's what they can document. So we've really been focused. I've been doing videos every day, and we've been talking to a lot of folks about how to stop that frustration that leads to depression that can lead to suicide. And it's through teams, right? Military Transition Roundtable is about forming a team of 8 to 10 people to walk through transition together. So we're connecting those two.
Well, Dawn, San Antonio is a military city, and thank you for the leadership you've been providing. Sally, it's about time for us to go to work exclusively, but before we do that, we have a mantra here, and it's nonprofit strong. Could I ask everybody to type in those words? Nonprofit strong. Dawn, what are we?
Nonprofit strong.
John Tulin, what are we?
Nonprofit strong.
You got an A. Sally, what are we?
Nonprofit strong.
You passed. And now, if you have a question, I'm going to ask Sally a series of questions. And we're very serious about starting at 4 and ending at 5. But anytime you can either type it in the chat zone, chat space, or you can come on camera. But I have several questions ready for Sally. And Sally lets me pick on her. So I'm going to pick on her. Okay, Sally? Most of the nonprofits, I think 88% of the 1.5 million nonprofits have annual budgets of under $500,000. would you say there are advantages for working for a smaller or medium-sized nonprofit?
Yes, as you have already heard today, organizational cultural health is very important to the workplace, and I believe it's easier to do in a smaller organization. They tend to be more like family, and that is definitely an advantage. They're also more nimble. They can usually turn more quickly because there is just less red tape. And people tend to be at those organizations because they strongly and truly believe in their missions. And I believe those are all advantages of being small. I would say one of the disadvantages is that they tend to be, as you just said, I mean, they're small, so they have fewer resources. And so people may be taking on more responsibility. However, I think taking on more responsibility is actually a really good thing. People tend to be more cross-trained. They tend to be able to wear more hats, which actually allows them.
That exactly is my next question. I'm going to butt in.
Okay.
But how realistic is it for the president, the CEO, the board to expect an employee to handle multiple responsibilities?
Completely realistic and absolutely wonderful. So attitude is everything. And one of the mistakes I see, especially in large organizations, so again, this is an advantage of a smaller organization. One of the mistakes I see in larger organizations is that stay in your lane mentality. And what that does is it creates silos. And I think many people have worked or do work in places where they are only encouraged or responsible for what's in their job description. I would like to, if I have a minute, I'd like to give an example of.
Please do, Sally, please do.
Super. So I'll say internally at Bryant Group, we believe in cross-training and in working as a team. You will never hear someone say, stay in your lane here. So twice a week, we have a meeting that we call the stand-up meeting. Not everybody stands, I do. But we have the stand-up meeting, and what we do is all full-time people at Bryant Group get on Zoom, and we go around and we do three things. We say what our number one priority for the day is, where we're stuck or challenged, and then something we call sink or swim. So I'll tell you really quickly why we do that and what they mean. The number one focus of the day is so that everybody understands what everyone else is doing and how what they're doing interacts with what the other people are doing, and can ask questions about what's going on, make sure we all understand. The second one, where we're stuck or challenged, is super important, because what we believe at Bryant Group is everyone has expertise and everyone has great experience in all different areas. And so we may have somebody from the search team give advice on my talent development workshop. If I'm stuck in a place with a client, anybody can jump in. Whoever else is stuck, it's like, how can we fix it? And how can I help you? Would this be helpful? So we cross right there. How do we solve together? The third thing, the sink or swim, so we just affectionately call it that, is you get to say one of three things. One, you're treading water. Treading water means I have plenty to do, but I could reprioritize to help a teammate. Swimming means I am full up. No balls are gonna drop, but I'm full up. I can't help anybody. I've got it. And drowning or sinking means I'm gonna miss some client deadlines unless someone helps me. And so we team up people who are drowning or sinking with people who are treading water. And people get to learn different things. The other day, one of our recruiters took on the task of writing a marketing piece, and it was amazing. She did a great job. So people get to learn new things and get to help each other. And there are no silos. Actually, I shouldn't say that. We work very hard to not have silos. I'd love to say we're perfect, but nowhere is perfect.
Hey, Sally, what is your recommendations for supervisors who need to evaluate and monitor the progress of employees working from home?
Metrics and accountability, because part of what working from home means is that everybody, number one, has a different idea of what that means. Some people think it means that they can start at 8 and stop at 10 and start again at noon and stop at 3 and start again at 7 o'clock at night. And in some cultures that might be fine as long as you're getting your job done. So knowing what the expectations are, number one, for results, and number two, for culture, are really important. For us, we don't clock in and clock out, but we do expect that each other will be available during business hours, knowing that we have people from the West Coast to the East Coast and understanding what those time parameters are. I think those two expectations, cultural expectation and metrics, ensure that you can successfully work from home. You and I were talking earlier, Bryant Group has been basically fully remote with people throughout the country in different locations for almost 5 years.
Well before COVID, right?
Well before.
What are your recommendations on nonprofits keeping morale and chemistry high if they're working virtually?
Without, maybe at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I really believe that this cultural health and focusing on trust as your basic behavior is part of what keeps morale high. We also talked about the working as a team, but I want to go back to this behavioral and cultural piece. So one of my favorite books, if you haven't read it, is 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. And
by the way, could you repeat that again?
Yeah, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni, Lencioni. And we do trainings that are based on these 5 dysfunctions, but we actually turn them around and work with what he has also termed the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. So it's really important for teams to know, we've already talked about vulnerability-based trust, authenticity, being able to admit that you are wrong, being able to admit that you are stuck. We do that twice a week here. We admit, I have a challenge, I'm stuck, help me. So that kind of, I trust that my coworker has my best interest at heart. I trust that my coworker has my organization's best interest at heart. That's the basis of it. There are 4 other behaviors that all build on each other. The second one is being able to engage in productive conflict. And I know in the nonprofit world, oh my goodness, conflict, nobody likes that word. This is about engaging in discussion and ensuring that your voice is heard and respecting all voices. When you have that productive conflict, then you can be committed to the decisions that come out of that. That's the 3rd behavior, is commitment. And the 4th behavior is accountability. And this comes back to how do you work well remotely? Again, you have to know what you're accountable for and what your peers are accountable for, and be able to hold each other to that. And all of that ends in the top of the pyramid, which is results. If you have those first 4 behaviors, your results will increase. I believe that in some ways, it's almost easier. I know some people are going to not like that, but in some ways, it's almost easier to have a healthy culture remotely because there's just a little bit less of that opportunity to have some inter-office drama.
Thank you. Hey, I went to your website, and this one was obvious about strong two-way communication. Can you explain? I've heard of work-family balance, but you all have the concept of work-life integration. What does that mean?
So work-life integration definitely is from my belief and philosophy that it's really life balance. So if you're working in your passion, which we talked about earlier, if you're working in your passion and in something that you feel called to do, then your work life is a robust, fulfilling part of your life. And so it's not, oh my gosh, I have to work 40 years to get a paycheck so I can retire and actually enjoy my life. No, let's enjoy the work that we're doing. Let's do that for a reasonable amount of time. Let's meet our goals and be held accountable to the things we've said we'll do. but there, and then integrate that, right, with what else do you enjoy? What kind of things do you enjoy doing that are outside of that? But I really cringe at this idea that there's this, oh, I got to go to work and then I get to have fun. Let's have a fulfilling life that includes all of it.
I'm gonna again go, you talked about it, but nonprofits, as much as anything, depend on leadership. That's both management, but also the board of directors. How would you summarize leadership with Moxie?
Summarizing leadership with Moxie, and you did cut out a little bit there. So I heard something about the board of directors, and maybe, can you just repeat?
I'm just saying for your CEO, your executive director, your board, how can they exercise Moxie?
Anything that pushes you outside of your comfort zone, trying to working to do something in a different way. A lot of people on this webinar are fundraisers, or they lead organizations where fundraising is important. How can you approach fundraising in a new way? How can you, somebody said earlier, it's scary to ask for gifts, and it is scary in the beginning. But when Jim teaches you how to do it, you'll find out, right? It's fun. You did something that you didn't know you could do, and then you might like it. I will also say, Jim, if you're never failing in your organization, if you're never making a mistake, you are not leading with Moxie. I will tell you, and you will laugh because you told everybody this is my third time on the webinar with you. So I think you were the first person maybe who asked me to be a guest speaker in the last few years. And I've had many, many requests since, and I will be really honest, it took a lot of Moxie. This was not my favorite thing to do. I was afraid to do it. I would listen back. I would hear what happened, and I would say, oh my goodness, that was really not very good. So I either need to stop doing that, or I need to get a lot better at it. And it took Moxie to do that. It also took some Moxie to stand up in front of my team and say, wow, that was terrible. I did a terrible job, and here's what I learned from it. So I think leading with Moxie, if you're comfortable and you're not doing anything different, just be assured you are not leading with Moxie.
Is there anyone, I have some more questions, but is there anyone in the audience who'd like to place a question to Sally? This is your chance. I say she knows more about nonprofit human capital than anyone on the planet. This is your chance. Anybody else in the learning community? Okay, Don Gleason.
Feel like I'm jumping in all the time today. This is what I'm just
Okay,
loving.
you'll get an extra Tootsie Roll.
Hey, I love Tootsie Rolls. I'm loving everything Sally's saying. And the question I put in the chat is, I'm particularly impressed with you using DISC. I am a DISC consultant, and I use that for military in transition to help them understand themselves as well as the person they're interviewing. I'm wondering, when it comes to fundraising, is there a problem or something that we should be careful of in applying DISC in the fundraising realm?
Great question, Don. I first want to thank you for the work that you do. My son is a captain in the military in the Army, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing there. Sometimes people, I think, use DISC to determine whether they think someone will be good at a particular kind of job. Let's say frontline major gift fundraising. And they assume that the people on the DISC scale who are more outgoing are better fundraisers. So of course, you and I know that means the D's and the I's. But the S's and the C's, who may be more introspective and maybe are more careful planners, and maybe sometimes, especially on the S scale, more concerned about supporting people, are just as good. Any person with any personality can be good at any of the positions, including frontline fundraising. They'll need to be supported, as you know, in a different way. But I do find a real risk of having, we have clients who say, will you use the DISC assessment in hiring? And our answer is, we would rather use it to help you with onboarding your candidate of choice.
Sally, by the way, is Jeff Shouty still with us? Okay, he went on to his Google clusters. You pointed out we had a record year last year, Sally. I think it was 471 billion. And I got a couple batteries into my calculator. That's $1 million a minute. But what have you found? What are the characteristics of hiring someone who is good at asking for money?
What are the characteristics of a person who's good at asking for money? Is that the question?
Yes.
Humble.
I find that very interesting. You led with humble, because you would think it'd be someone puffing out their chest, you know, I'm a big shot and I can ask you for $1 million. I find it really interesting. You led with humility. Thank you.
A good listener.
Mhm.
And not afraid to ask for the gift. And those are three things that might be a little bit difficult to find in
Hey,
one
could
person.
you do me a favor? Repeat those three.
Humble, a good listener, and isn't afraid to ask for the gift. The reason I lead with humble is because people who have a big ego are about themselves instead of being about the donor and instead of being about the organization. So although they may raise money, they leave a lot of money on the table because donors don't feel included or cared about. Obviously, a good listener will find out what's important to the donor and frankly, strategic, which I didn't say among the first three, but how do you match what is important to them with what the organization needs? Because not every gift is a good gift. If it's
Can
not,
you repeat that again? That's something I believe so wholeheartedly.
not every gift is a good gift. If it
By
does,
the way, but I like to say all unrestricted gifts are good gifts.
agree. Exactly. As long as they're truly unrestricted, right? No strings attached. But in the restricted realm, which a lot of donors want to do, it does need to align with your vision, your strategy, and your core values as an organization. So I would say listening, and then sort of that frosting on the cake, the strategy, and now I forgot, being able to ask. So we do find a lot of people. Now you have to, we interview a lot of people and we've all been fundraisers. So we dig. We dig in, we dig down. We've all been nonprofit leaders of some kind. And we find out, did the person, you can't nice people into gifts. So were you just in the room when it happened, or did you actually help bring the person along, understand the project, understand who they are, and ask them to participate?
We have about 14 minutes left. Are there any questions and comments? I still have some material to cover with Sally, but I want to look to our learning community audience. Anybody from the Midwest? We want to be geographically balanced here. Is there anyone out
Jim,
there? I think we had someone sign in from Chicago. Who we got here?
This is Jeff. Hello.
Hey,
Can you
Jeff.
hear me?
What's your
Hey, I'm not from the
nonprofit?
Midwest. I'm from Irving, down the street from, I think, Sally's office. Yeah. Hey, Sally,
Okay.
I could not miss this one. I love listening to Sally. I learned so much.
Okay. Hey,
and Jim as
what's your
well.
question, please?
Yeah, so not really a question, more just sort of a observation, in that I've been in the fundraising area for almost 30 years. And when I started out, it wasn't
I
as
can't see your gray hair. You can see mine.
so it's covered up.
Yeah.
So anyway, my point is, I came out of the corporate world, like a lot of people that get into fundraising. There was not real strategy to do that. And I was in the corporate world. I was very fortunate to get a lot of management training. What I found when I got into the nonprofit sector, and over the course of the 30 years, is sort of the nonprofit industry or sector not having a lot of management training for the leadership who are in charge of large development offices, development staff. I'm thinking some of that has changed. I've been with large national organizations and small ones here in the Dallas area. And again, it depends on their budget. But I think that was one of the things that really struck me very early on when I left the corporate world was the lack of resources that nonprofits had to invest into their teams for management training. I think that's gotten a little bit better lately, but it is something that I think as people move into jobs, that if they're going to manage people, sometimes they don't know how and say things in direct ways that are not always the most positive way. So, and I love the leading with humble or being humble.
Yeah.
That was the other thing that always struck me was how many nonprofits would say to me, as I started to work with corporations, well, that company should be giving to us. They should be doing this. And I'm be like, well, I guess we got to make our case a little bit about that. So I like the humble. I love that very
Yeah, me
much.
too. Hey, Sally, can you talk a little? I think we all would share the sentiment. The nonprofit sector is a great place to work. We have 12 million people, and comparatively, the wages and benefits are very good. But could you tell there's both the two bottom lines? There's just a feeling of satisfaction and fulfillment. Can you talk about the joy of working in the nonprofit sector?
Yes. First, thank you, Jeff, for your comments. And I will really quickly just say that one of the silver linings of the pandemic was a great realization. We can call that, we have the great resignation, the great recruitment, the great retention. We're going to have the great realization of the need for leadership education.
Yes, absolutely.
We saw that, and that was very heartening. So the joy of working in nonprofit. Well, first of all, Jim, I would love to see these numbers when they are updated through 2021 and 2022. The demand for people it's mind blowing. As you and I talked about, just in the overall economy, we're at basically the lowest unemployment you can get. We're at about 3.5% unemployment. There are 2 jobs open for every person who's looking for a job. 2 jobs open for every person looking for a job. I would love to know, because I would not be surprised if there are more than that in the fundraising space.
Mhm.
So anybody like Jeff who came from corporate into the nonprofit world, this is an opportunity for people to go into a job that is fulfilling, that's intrinsically fulfilling, that they get to make a difference in the world, they get to make an impact. It's a great opportunity for the nonprofits to bring in people with expertise in finance or sales, or I know sales, we all think sales is a bad word, but relational sales in these areas where it's good for the nonprofit and good for the person. I frankly cannot imagine working in a place where I didn't feel passionate about what we're doing. And that's what this world offers people.
Completely agree, 100%.
Hey, I'm going to spring a surprise question on you. 70% of the employees of the nonprofit sector are women. What do you think explains that?
I'm sorry. Did you direct
Here's
that?
Al Hartman. Al, are you saying something?
Yes, can you hear me now?
We can't hear you. Get closer to your microphone.
How about now? Can you hear me?
You get a little closer to your microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, we'll go. Swallow your microphone. What's your question?
Well, 70% women, but my original question was working with boards. Ms. Bryant has been very precise about how to deal with her team, her staff, but how important do you think is it to involve the board in the activity?
I'm sorry, John Largent, did you understand? I don't understand Al's question. Do you? And you can repeat that.
Yes, Al's asking how important Sally had talked about the importance of building relationships with team and staff, but what about emphasizing the relationships with the board members?
So happy to answer both. I'll take Al's question first and I'll come back to your question about women, Jim. I do have a theory on that. Al, of course, the answer is, in my opinion, it depends. So it depends on the position being hired. Of course, if it's the CEO of the nonprofit, the board is the hiring authority and needs to be involved. When it's at the leadership level of the organization, in other words, someone who reports to the CEO or the president, then I do believe board involvement is still very important in matters of understanding, does this person fit with the culture? Who are they going to work closely with on the board? So if you're hiring your chief development officer, I would think the board chair and the chair of the development committee would want to be involved. Knowing that really those staff hires are ultimately the CEO's job in day-to-day management of the organization, but that the board should be very involved at those levels. I would say below those levels, it's probably not necessary, and it would just depend on a case-by-case basis. And I don't, absolutely. Did that answer your question? I don't want to forget your question about the women, Joe.
Al, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, I got the okay sign. All right, super. So Jim, I see historically that women have gravitated to what we consider maybe the supporting or caring jobs. So you think about historically, nursing has been more female than male. Teaching for a while was more female than male. I don't know if that's still true. And so I believe that maybe just historically, culturally, men were more encouraged or maybe just more naturally gravitating toward where can I make money rather than, you know, they have some families to support all of that. Now that it's more sort of, I think things are more equal and the culture is changing. I would love to see how our profession changes, especially at the leadership levels, because as you say, it's 70% women, but at the managerial and leadership levels, it is still, the women are still less than half. I don't know the exact statistics, but the imbalance, especially considering that 70% of the nonprofit workforce is women, we want to see more and more of them being encouraged and educated toward those leadership roles.
Mm-hmm. And
And
you
Sally,
know,
I
didn't show this stat, but I think it's between 40 to 45% of nonprofit boards are made up of women. And that's way, way ahead of the corporate boards.
And
Right
Sally,
on.
and I do have a question. I think with the, I think the nonprofit sector is still struggling with the diversity issue on development staffs, particularly many of the ones I've been on. I think there's still a need for more diversity on the development teams in the nonprofit sector.
And Jeff, yes, if we talking about racial diversity, which I don't know, my stats might be a little bit old, but if I remember correctly, the United States is over more than 40% non-white. Mm-hmm. And we have about 16%, last time I checked, non-white people in our advancement profession. So very much underrepresented. We also like to think about all kinds of diversity. We're looking at all kinds of diversity in fundraising and in nonprofits, whether that's where you come from in your background, socioeconomic diversity, whether it's physical ability. I mean, oh my goodness, if you think about how few people we have in the nonprofit world that have physical disabilities.
Absolutely,
yeah. Very able, especially in this remote world where they maybe are used to working at home, some of them, right? Because it's just harder to be transported.
So I like
that they have so much to add, so much.
Agree.
Sally, once again, you do such a good job. I better warn you, we're going to invite you back for the 4th time. But before we end this show, can you talk a moment what you've seen are trends in metrics for advancement teams?
Oh, Jim, you said you'd throw some hard ones at me. So different, right? When we're looking at different teams. And I will just say, I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer that. We are seeing that there is a move, and this maybe isn't exactly about metrics, but there's a little bit of a move toward something I alluded to earlier. So for a while, it was the thing to be donor centered in your fundraising. And that is a good thing, don't get me wrong. But we're seeing a move toward is it strategically aligned with the organization, and that the metrics and the results have to be based on the strategy. So you're bringing in gifts that don't align with the strategy, that's becoming a no-no. And it sounds like, just, of course, who would think any differently? But you look 20 years ago, a gift was a gift. Right. So that doesn't specifically get at metrics, but it does get at that philosophy behind what's changing.
Sally, how about this last one? And it's not last in importance, but if you're an advancement professional looking for a job or for a new job, what's your advice in 1 minute?
Well, I can see your slides, and everybody can, and I'll agree with all that. So I'm just going to switch it around, and I'm going to tell people, if you're recruiting rather than if you're looking for a job. If you're recruiting right now, do not rely on ads. We had a client who placed an ad, and in 2 months they had this many resumes. That's a zero, right? You have to network. You have to be proactive. It is the only way that you are going to get the best person, or sometimes any person, for your job.
Sally, Bryant, once again, it's a pleasure to have you. I'm going to skip through these final slides here. By the way, a couple of points of bookkeeping. We are going on social media. First of all, how about a virtual applause for Sally Bryant, who, again, I don't know anybody who knows more about human capital in the nonprofit sector. Thank you, Sally, for being a shining beacon for our whole industry. What we're going to do, we are going to post a short written summary on Facebook and LinkedIn. And then John Largent takes about an hour to do a magic spin cycle. And we are going to send a tape to everybody who registered. And we're also going to put the recording on LinkedIn and Facebook. So I want to thank Sally Bryant again. Always, third time, thank you for being such a great partner. And thank you for the leadership that the Bryant Group, Bryant Group gives to the entire nonprofit sector. And I want to thank our learning community for, if you're a nonprofit leader or a professional or a volunteer, you do something very real to touch, improve, and save more lives. So thank you. And I'll tell you what, we'll have some tough questions ready for Jeff Jowdy on metrics of fundraisers and how to hire one. So Sally, give our regards to everybody in the Bryant family and the Bryant Group. And thank you for being such a great guest. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.